Rachna here. I'm the CEO at the Graduate Students Association, and welcome to our Grad Chat Parents seminar or webinar that we have on Wednesday. It's wonderful to have the attendees who have joined us to have a good chat with Alan Yang, the Principal Solicitor at the UMSU Legal Service. And it's fantastic to have Alan come and join and talk about employment and tenancy law changes. So before I bring Alan on, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from where I'm broadcasting, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to past, present, and emerging leaders and the Aboriginal people and the Torres Strait Islanders. So the Grad Chat programs have been, in fact, organized by our wonderful student engagement team over the last, in fact, 14 to 16 weeks from Monday to Friday. And it's been fantastic to have guest speakers. And today I'd like to warmly welcome Alan Yang, the Principal Solicitor from UMSU Legal. Welcome, Alan, on board.
Hi, Rachna. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations from all of us at GSA on the arrival of Xavier and you and your partner to be new parents. So we're very, very happy for you. And thank you for taking time from a very, very busy personal and professional life to kind of spend that 1 hour with us. So Alan, I think for all our graduates, many of them may be international students who have not kind of had an understanding of what a legal service does. Would you be able to give us a bit of overview about what does UMSU Legal Service offer and who can access it?
Yep, sure. And Rachna, before I start as well, I'll also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from my home, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and the elders past, present, and emerging. And I note that today is the final day of the National Reconciliation Week, and I think it's particularly important in the context of what's happening in America to reflect on the issues of racism on the Aboriginal peoples and other minorities at home, close to home in Australia.
Yeah.
So the UMSU Legal Service is a free, confidential service to all current students, undergrads or postgrads at uni. So we provide legal advice and financial counselling advice to students. Ordinarily, they can contact us by phone. We run a telephone advice line every Monday in the afternoons from Monday to Thursday, but we only have one phone, so it doesn't quite work when we sort of working from home. So we, over the last couple of months, we've moved our service to an exclusively online service. So we ask the students to contact us through our online form, and then we'll get back to them either by phone or by email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we talk about legal services, that as you said, it's a free legal advice service. It's for students of the University of Melbourne. And when you say what's the kind of laws that they can contact you about, what are the kind of laws is it just general law, general legal advice, or is there any particular specialist clinics or other things that you actually offer at UMSU Legal?
Well, it's general. It's a generalist legal service. So we aim to help students with their everyday legal issues. So that could be like if they get a fine, if they have a tenancy issue, if they get into a car accident, employment, social security issues, consumer issues, criminal issues. So it could be a range, anything and everything. But we sort of develop a little bit of expertise in terms of just by the sheer number of people coming to us with tenancy issues in particular. That's a lot of tenancy issues that our students face. But yeah, they can come to us with anything any legal issues, and if we can't help, we can direct students to where they can get assistance.
Fantastic. So when we talk about legal assistance, is it you provide information, you advise, and do you also offer any casework support like representation in courts?
Yeah. So we do. We generally work on one-off advice. So if students have a question, we'll give them advice, and they can they know their legal position. They can then go off and write a letter, or they can then go and apply for in VCAT or that type of situations. But for some students who might need a more comprehensive support, we will help them. We'll take on casework. We could go to court to represent students.
Yeah, fantastic. And before we move on to an update on tenancy and employment laws, what have you found, Alan? What are some of the common legal problems that UMSU is presented with normally by students? I think you talked about tenancy, but what are the other issues?
Yeah, so tenancy infringements, lots of infringements, employment issues, and then sort of to a lesser extent, sort of contract, consumer law, that type of things. And one thing that doesn't, a lot of students, they come to us, and we encourage students to do that. A lot of them don't come to us just when they have an issue. They come to us before they have an issue. For example, if they have an employment contract, they are not sort of sure about. We encourage them to come to us and sort of show us the contract. We can give them some advice about that. So it doesn't need to wait until something happens. If people are proactive about asking legal questions, we're very happy to answer them.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think that's a very good message that you're kind of giving people, is that, contact you all to actually, first of all, it's okay to actually understand, whether it's a legal matter, and you can offer assistance or you can refer them off. But it's better, trying to prevent it and getting the early information is much better to kind of manage the issue, rather than coming to you all or going anywhere else when it's later. And when we talk about infringements, just for people who understand, it's issues related to fines and other things, isn't that, Alan?
So fines, it could be the public transport fine, it could be a driving fine, and the way, and often that when there's quite a few options to dealing with fines. And whether it's from applying to pay by installment, or whether there are specific circumstances that you could apply for, or that sometimes that we sort of be overwhelmed by the number of fines that we have. We also have a financial counsellor that can assist as well.
That's fantastic. So Alan, before I just get you to start on, which is fantastic to hear about tenancy and employment law, just one final question that I had was, in relation to representation work at courts, do you kind of represent people at magistrate, family and tribunals? Is that where the representation work you do? And do you, people who can access legal aid, can they come to you, or what's the criteria?
So mostly we assist people mostly in VCAT and in the magistrate's court. But like I said, they are a small percentage of the students that we help. From time to time, we also dabble in other jurisdictions, children's court occasionally, but also the AAT. And from time to time, we also brief pro bono barristers to provide the external expertise.
Thank you so much, Alan. So we look forward to hearing about the legal updates in relation to tenancy and employment law.
Sure. Okay. Should I get started?
Yes, please.
Great. Okay. So I might well, first of all, obviously this presentation is sort of general information that's general nature only, and it's not a substitute for professional legal advice. If you have any questions, please come to us for further assistance. I might skip the first few slides. I think they just a bit of explanation about how we work and how to contact us. COVID-19 has obviously changed a lot of things in society. Obviously, you know, the health, first and foremost, the health impact. But you know, legally, it's various governments have enacted emergency powers that would, for example, in Victoria, that the chief health officer would have various directions. That's why we all, you know, working from home, for example. That's why, you know, we can only have this many people at a restaurant, this many people at our house. Accessing to courts and tribunals, that's been changed as well. You physically cannot go into a magistrate's court. They will require you to identify yourself as a lawyer, for example, and lots of court hearings and VCAT hearings are now done by phone. There's also changes to lots of laws. Obviously, tenancy and employment, we're going to go into a bit of detail today. But things like, you know, bankruptcy, witnessing, signing of documents, they all, there's a whole host of changes to both, you know, Commonwealth and state legislations. Just bankruptcy, for example, if you, the amount that you need to owe has now increased, so people can't be declared bankrupt that easily, and they also given more time to respond. Obviously, signing documents, witnessing people signing documents, very sensibly now can be done for some of them can be done remotely. But yeah, like I said, I want to focus a bit more on tenancy and employment law. So the changes in tenancy law, it's a Victorian law, and they've some of the, I guess, the highlights, I guess, are that they've banned evictions. They've stopped rent increases. They banned on putting tenants on the blacklist, and it's an emphasis on rent reduction. Also, that they allowed tenants to end lease early due to hardship. So those are the changes. Now, those changes are in place for 6 months only at this stage, so until end of September. So they're not, you know, this is not a permanent change, but obviously very important change for people who are affected by COVID-19. So if we look at the first dot point, that's moratorium on eviction. So that's laws being introduced to prevent tenants from being evicted if they can't pay rent. So there's a bit more detail in the next slide. That this law, like I said before, it's in operation from end of March to end of September. So if you can't pay rent, if you're a tenant, if you can't pay rent, you're not going to be able to, the landlord won't be able to kick you out. You know, more technically, they can't apply to VCAT to get a possession order to kick you out. They can still be evicted for other reasons, but VCAT will need to consider the interest of and the impact to both the landlord and the tenant. Now, some of those other reasons are, I guess, fairly reasonable. For example, if you're a tenant who are trashing the place and just damaging the property, burning their house, yes, you can still be evicted for that. If the landlord, is legitimately moving in because they themselves are suffering from financial hardship, that's another reason. But they all need to go to VCAT for a member to make that sort of balancing act. Yeah. Yes, but the important thing is if you can't pay rent, you're not going to be evicted. At least until the
So
end.
Alan, can I please interrupt and request clarity for our graduates that it's important that we, as people who have a tenancy agreement, that where possible we continue to pay the rent or negotiate to reduce the rent and do something about it, just not stop paying, because that's not going to work either, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can't pay rent, they're seeking of rent reduction is really the thing that I mean this tenants being prevented from being evicted does not change the fact that they still have an obligation to pay rent. So they still need to pay rent. But it's they just so if you can pay rent, you must pay rent. If you can pay some rent but you can't afford to pay all of it, yeah, you should seek a rent reduction with your landlord. And pay that reduced amount. And it's a very good point, because the consequences of not paying just is that you will have this debt accrue, and it just by the end of September it's all going to come back and get to you, which is why I think yes, that this gives you a short-term certainty, security. But this doesn't, to deal with the real issue is seeking rent reduction or getting to agreement, which we'll talk about shortly as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a good segue. So the next sort of slide that we the next point that we want to talk about is rent reduction. Like I said, the obligation on a tenant to pay rent remains. It doesn't mean that it's not a rental holiday, as they say in the media. You still have to pay rent, but obviously there are situations where people lost their job, people being stood down, their financial issues. That it's a real they really cannot afford to pay rent or the full amount of rent. Now, government very much encourages tenants and landlords to come to agreement to reduce rent. Now, ordinarily before COVID, it doesn't. I must admit, it's not. Landlords would. The different power positions of the two parties, usually it's a rent increase, not a rent reduction. But I think in this COVID times, this really a rent reduction would obviously help tenants, but it will also ensures that the landlord knowing that they're going to get something, that's a certainty that they're going to get something, and that they if they come to some sort of agreement. They may, they can potentially go to their bank as well to, if they have a mortgage, they can sort of defer their interest payments, for example. So rent reduction, it's the first step to seek a rent reduction. We think is to really make an assessment of your financial circumstances. So really have a good look at your budget, your finances, to see how much money that you have, how much income that you're getting, how much sort of support, whether it's JobKeeper or JobSeeker, how much sort of money they have, how much expenses they have, how much realistically that you can afford to pay, and I think that's a very important point, because without doing that work, we really don't know whether we can pay 100, 150, 200, 300 a week. I think so. That's an important work, and we've got a financial counsellor at the legal service who can help with that. She can give you some resources, or have a conversation with you about getting to budget. Now, once we know our financial situation, once we arrive at a I guess a weekly figure that we can realistically afford, the next step really is just to approach the landlord to seek a reduction. Now, there are we have over the last couple of months, we've developed template letters, template emails, and template agreements that tenants can use to seek a rent reduction. Now, we're also seeing situations where landlords or agents, and this happens a lot more in student accommodations. Landlords and agents, they would either get on the front foot, or as a response to a rent reduction request from a tenant, they would give you their form. They would have developed a form, and on the form you'll find that it's a rent deferral and not a rent reduction. So on the face of it, it will say things like, oh yeah, you don't have to pay rent until this day, or you pay this percentage of the rent until this day, but then afterwards you need to pay them all back. So that's a sneaky way that a lot of landlords are sort of catching tenants. And one thing that and Consumer Affairs, so the government, are quite want to stress is that this is none of this. We have to make sure that it's a rent reduction, not a rent deferral, because if you're in financial hardship, rent deferral does not help you. We have to make sure that it's a rent reduction, which means it's a reduced rent for a period of time, and after that, you don't need to pay the difference back. So if now, hopefully landlords and sort of agents are sensible enough to recognise that this COVID impacts on everyone, including their tenants, and that they will come to an agreement with their tenant. But there certainly have been situations where landlords are, I guess, playing hardball. They don't want to agree to a rent reduction, or we're also seeing quite a fair bit that landlords just don't respond. They think by not responding they don't need to make a decision. So it's frustrating to get into that situation, and it's really stressful when you don't have when you just don't have the finances to pay rent, and you're not getting any help from your landlord or response. We that's again, we can help with that, but the next step is to go through. So Consumer Affairs Victoria has created a dispute resolution service for tenants and landlords who can't get an agreement. So what you do is you simply go to Consumer Affairs. They have a dedicated form. You contact them. They would try to play sort of the middleman, try to conciliate an outcome. And if they can't get that done, they would handball it to dispute settlement resolution service. So that's another sort of external dispute resolution service run by the government. And if none of that, and they will try to help you to reach an agreement. If that doesn't work, someone would step in from the dispute resolution centre to make an order to have a really binding agreement for both parties. It can be, even if the landlord doesn't agree, even if the landlord is evasive and doesn't respond, there are external dispute resolution services that can help tenants to get to that point. And it's important to get an agreement ASAP, really, because agreement generally we can't. We don't. From the information that we have, Consumer Affairs doesn't, and doesn't backdate agreements. Obviously, if the landlord agrees, that's fine. But the information that we have is that if they try to negotiate an agreement, or if they set down like a binding agreement, that wouldn't backdate the rent from that day. So that means you may need to pay full rent until a new agreement is agreed. But definitely rent reduction is something that all students should look at if they're in financial hardship. And that's something that we, so we've got a template letter that students can use, template agreements. But if people are in financial hardship, later on we'll mention a few financial help options that may help students. But rent reductions is something that students should really think about. Yeah.
Perfect. So can I just ask you, in relation to tenancy, that your general advice to the people would be is ensure that you are being proactive, you are addressing your situation as quickly as you can, with your landlord, or taking legal advice to do it. But procrastinating over it and not taking an action is not going to be the way forward to help you resolve this matter. Would that be a kind of message to everyone, Alan?
Yeah, that's right. I think legal issues generally, and definitely including this one, that it's easier if we get onto the front foot and sort of go from there. But if we sort of delay it, things may snowball, and the other real negative impact is that, for example, this one, you could be responsible for a lot more rent than you otherwise would have. So yeah, so I think with all legal issues, we encourage students to contact us, even if they're not sure whether it's a legal issue, or they just want to have a chat. We can we welcome students to come to us early.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful. And I think it would be good for students who listen to these issues is that even if you forecast in the next few months, your savings are dwindling down and there's a potential that it's going to impact your rent payments, that, try and seek the advice straight right at the moment, and ensure that you're more proactive, because I think taking legal advice or seeking legal help has no shame. And in fact, it's a very good thing for people, coming from different countries, different walks of life, who've never had an interaction with the legal system. That legal system is to protect our rights, and it's not just an adversarial system. So thank you, Alan. That's very, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I might add is that I often tell students that our service is probably similar to a GP, that you don't I guess you don't go to the GP often. you don't want to go to the GP often. Let's be honest. But if something's wrong, it's a good idea to go to them. If you're not sure whether something's wrong, you don't need to know. You just need to know to go there, and they can tell you whether that's something and how to deal with it. Even I guess sort of our social media, for example, presence. It's similar to GP's office again. That we find it. I guess not too many people will follow their GP's practice, but it's important to know that they are there for when you need help.
Fantastic. So I think you were also going to share with us issues related to employment law. What are some of the issues that commonly arise for people? I think you had some information about the financial help that people can secure in relation.
Yeah. So I might just quickly.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, I might just quickly go through some financial help that people can get. Victorian government has a rent relief grant up to $2,000. There's got various eligibility criteria, but that requires you to firstly have negotiated a reduced rent agreement. So that's another incentive to get an agreement or at least start the process. That would put $2,000. The money will go directly to the landlord, but it would go. It would be there to pay your rent. So I guess that's $2,000 if you're eligible. That's $2,000 that doesn't need to come from your pocket, which will help. Melbourne Uni has an emergency support fund, which is not without problems, but I think our report is that it works. For some students, there may be a bit of a delay due to the overwhelming demand. The International Student Emergency Relief Fund is administered by uni, so that COVID-19 Emergency Support Fund. So if you have any sort of issues about applying for those funds, the advocacy service at UMSU can help. Our financial counsellor can also help. Now, just quickly, I might just before we move on to employment law, I just want to touch on a couple points about sort of early ending lease early, because I know that a lot of students are sort of in that in that boat really, that whether it's that they need to end their lease early and go home, whether it's interstate or back to their parents' house, or internationally, students who can't come back to Melbourne from overseas. From a couple of weeks ago, law was changed to allow tenants to end their lease early by giving out a 14-day notice to their landlord. If you're suffering a severe hardship, which could be that you have you're in financial hardship due to COVID-19, that's a sufficient ground for you to give a 14-day notice. So that before that, there's no way to leave, to end a lease early, other than breaking a lease, which costs a fair bit of money. So that's a new law, new process that allows tenants to easier to sort of end a lease early, and we can if you're in that situation, we're happy to have a further chat with you about that. Shall I move to?
I think Tavita had a question. Tavita.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Rashna, and thanks again, Alan, for being on board. I just had a quick question, because I know you've got a lot of slides to get through. It was related to the issues on rent reduction, and I've heard a lot of stories and some feedback come back to me from actually the agents being the barriers to a lot of the support that tenants can get. So, like, when people are putting through a request for a reduction of the agent, it's the agent who actually stops telling the owner. And also, there are some wild stories about agents telling tenants, well, if you need money, maybe you dip into your super. And I don't know, I just wanted to get some comments from you on that. And what are some legalities around that, do you know?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's been happening a bit initially, that I think some real estate agents been telling tenants to apply for early release of the super. I think the financial regulators coming and said that real estate agents should refrain from giving people financial advice. So that's obviously outrageous, but I think the relationship between in a tenancy arrangement, the relationship is between a tenant and a landlord, and an agent is literally an agent for the landlord. So so some of the things that we're seeing as well, Tavita, is that they will have their own forms. They will encourage you to enter into agreements to defer rent rather than reduce rent. They would their interest literally is the polar opposite to a tenant's interest. So they want as much money from you as possible. It's sometimes students will sort of get a form from the landlord, from the agent. They feel pressure, compelled to sign that. And our role is, don't do that. What they want and what you want are two different things. If they being obstructionists, if they don't communicate, don't pass on your request to the landlord, they're really the same thing. It's as if the landlord doesn't respond to you, and we should the tenant should apply to Consumer Affairs to get some external dispute resolution help.
Okay, great. Thanks for your advice, Alan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're moving on to employment law now.
Yeah. So employment is another big issue. We've been seeing inquiries from students really from the very beginning. I think from the very beginning that we have students being stood down, students being let go, even they've been required to take leave, that type of things. And then from the last couple of months, they've the government introduced the JobKeeper scheme, and that with that's got a few sort of issues with it as well, or that allows employers to do certain things. So it's we want to have a chat about this. Now, before the JobKeeper scheme came in, the employers are only able to stand employees down in very limited circumstances. They can't just tell employees not to come in. That it must be very particular that if there's no work due to a shortage of work, it has to be very limited circumstances, which unfortunately this pandemic really fits that criteria. So before COVID-19, this is not it's not something that generally people are able to use, but unfortunately for COVID-19, you have businesses, you have industries shut down, and that's something that that we find employees being required to be stood down. They may also be required to take leave if their employment agreement or award allows it, or if it's reasonable in the circumstances. Now, the Fair Work Commission has also made changes to some awards to allow employees to take, I guess that's isolation leave, a couple of weeks, or they can sort of take more annual leave at half pay. So it's the amount of money the employer pays is the same, but it's a longer leave. But the JobKeeper scheme has really changed a lot of things. So the government introduced the JobKeeper scheme. Long and short of it is that eligible employers, they can claim a reimbursement of $1,500 before tax per fortnight from the government from end of March to end of September. that comes with a minimum payment guarantee to employees. So they will get either that, or they will get the usual amount that they work for. But it's no less than that. And it's a one-in, all-in arrangement. So eligible employers can't pick and choose which employees to apply for, which ones to leave out. If you need to, if they want to apply for it, they need to apply for everyone that's eligible. Now, some of the eligibility criteria for employers, they need to be that's a requirement of falling in turnover. So 15% if they are a registered charity, 30% if their business is less than the turnover is less than $1 billion, 50% if it's over. Now they also have some requirements. They can't be a government agency, can't be a local government. So if you're working in a swimming pool run by a local council, unfortunately that employer is not going to be eligible. That you can't be, your business can't be owned by a sovereign entity. So I think that's a big company, Donata. That's I think they run airport catering services. Employs 5,000-6,000 people around Australia, but all of them are not eligible to receive the JobKeeper payment because it's the company's owned by the Dubai government. So there are just some the eligibility. There's some obviously gaps. Obviously, universities are not eligible for that. If we move on to employees' eligibility, they need to be still employed, whether that's they're currently working or not working. That they need to be employed at the 1st of March, either as a full-time, part-time, or fixed-term employee, or as a long-term casual. And long-term casual means that they have been there for 12 months. It needs to be Australian citizens, age 18 or older. There's some exceptions for some visa holders, and there's some exceptions for independent 16 and 17-year-old employees, but they're quite small sort of percentage in terms of people who are eligible for this, and also they can't be on government parental leave schemes. So that's who will be eligible and how much money they can get. It's something that it's something that the government will provide until the end of September. This would this really would allow a lot of businesses to keep their employees. Now, to come with it, that there are quite a few problems that we've observed. For example, we've seen students coming to us saying that my employer is not applying for JobKeeper, so we can't get the money. Is there anything that we can do? Or that I'm a casual, I'm not eligible. Is there something I can do? That's a whole range of issues that if you're encountering any issues relating to the JobKeeper scheme, please contact us, and we can have a chat to you about your specific circumstances and give you advice. Now, to the JobKeeper scheme, it also comes with what they call enabling directions that an employer can give. So the next slide shows that again, the law is in operation until end of September. The eligible JobKeeper employers can direct their employees to change what they do, to reduce the hours or days that they work, or to change their location of work. They need to make sure that the directions are reasonable. They need to take into account, the particular set of circumstances for each employee. But if they've done that, employees will have to comply with the directions. And all this is assuming this is within the JobKeeper scheme. So this is employees getting the $1,500 from the government. So
Alan,
this
can
is,
I just ask you a question?
yeah.
In relation to job keepers, there are certain students who come to us and said their employer is not, they work in a place where their income hasn't dropped by 15%.
Yeah.
And the employer kind of has said, look at our books, we are getting funded by DHHS or wherever, and like government bodies where their funding hasn't dropped. And so is it the discretion of applying for JobKeeper a determination between the employer and ATO? It's something that's what happens, isn't it? The employer makes a decision set by the ATO whether they can apply for the JobKeeper fund or not. And based on that, only the employees are eligible for the JobKeeper fund. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So if they don't apply, or if they're not eligible, so if an employer chooses not to apply, or if they otherwise not eligible to apply, then their employee unfortunately are not eligible, because this payment is going through. This is a reimbursement to the employer. So I guess they wouldn't get that if they don't apply. There are situations where there's certainly situations where we see our students come to us about that. And look, the standard advice that we have is that the Australian Tax Office can give some information, and when they want to hear about this type of situations. So that there's a specific team at the ATO that they'll look into this, but if I mean, because this is the JobKeeper payment is a reimbursement, so there are, unfortunately, there are some practical difficulties for some employers to come up with the cash to pay everyone and then to get reimbursed. So there are situations where unfortunately students just not the employers for one reason or another will just choose not to take part, or not eligible to take part.
Thank you.
So what comes with the JobKeeper scheme is that they can choose. Employers can tell employees to change what they do, to reduce the number of days and hours, and change where they work. I guess it's quite sensible in some situations. For example, if you're working in a retail store, but the retail store is closed, they want you to work in their sort of online store, or in the warehouse to receive orders and pack orders. That's a quite legitimate sort of redirection of change of your usual duties. For some restaurants, that if it's closed but they do takeaway and delivery, you could be required to do other roles. For example, you might require to, if you're a waiter, you might be required to pack sort of takeaway boxes and deliver food. But they need to take into account the circumstances of each employee. If you don't have a vehicle, if you don't have a driver's license, if you can't deliver food, they can't ask you to do that. And obviously reduce the number of hours and days of work as well. There are no requirement that you need to work in order to get the $1,500. There are we've seen students in fact coming to us that they may be part-time employees, and their usual hours are sort of quite small, and maybe they work 8 hours a week, 12 hours a week or something, and that they but their employer felt that by working 10 hours a week, that doesn't they need to increase their number of hours to make sure that they earn their JobKeeper payment. So that's not that's not, generally speaking, that's not right. Depending on individual circumstances, and obviously people can agree to anything, but but they really, there's no, they don't have the power to increase the hours of work. They have power to direct the employees to reduce the number of hours. Yeah, so that's they're just quite a few, and with each of them, that's, you know, we have seen disputes that students coming to us about, you know, things like, you know, I work at this store, and I work for a chain retail store in this location. They asked me to go to another location to work because and this is a real example, because in that retail store, none of the employees there are eligible for JobKeeper. Maybe because they're casuals, maybe because they're international. So they need employees from store A to go to work in store B, and you know, and that might be you know, quite far away from where they work. It might not be convenient. So with each of those directions that we have seen people coming to us to get some legal advice. And again, you know, if that's something that that you're facing, feel free to contact us about that. It's a lot of, like the, you know, like the tenancy and disemployment laws. That laws actually keep changing, and it changed rapidly. You know, the tenancy provisions to allow people to leave to end their lease early only came in 2 weeks ago, and JobKeeper directions and you know, all the conditions that they change, they're being updated and amended all the time, and it's likely that it will still be amended going forward. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if they are, if for example, JobKeeper payments gets extended for some businesses or for some industries, or maybe it may be that may be changed to different forms, or it might include different employees. So if you have the current problem, please obviously come to us. But if you find your situations change in the future, and you wanted to have a chat to someone about that, we, you know, very happy to chat with you as well.
Fantastic. Are there any questions, Tavita, from your end?
Look, I had a few questions lined up, but I think Alan had basically covered most of it. I mean, I think the fact that, you know, all these issues arise for students related to the tenancies, like your home, where you can stay, and a lot of stress related around that. And it's great to see that you're up to date and sharing the changes, and especially the employment stuff, because I even had some students ask me similar questions to those examples you brought through, Alan, about, you know, making me do more hours. I said, oh, look, best bet is to go and see UMSU Legal and get some advice that way. But it's good to have this information at hand now. Thanks, Alan.
All right, thank you.
So I think probably a message to all the graduates who are, you know, watching this webinar, which we will be promoting very widely over the next few weeks, is just to understand that, you know, everyone in the COVID-19 situation will experience that with a reduction in our employment opportunities, with restrictions in relation to even overseas students being able to get the support they can get from their families, that it's very understandable that your housing and tenancy is an issue. And some of you are in college accommodation and other accommodation, but in all those cases, I think seek the legal help. And, you know, as Alan said, that you would be able to use that information to make more informed decisions rather than a decision which is more panic driven and about what my friend says. So I think that that's very important. And in relation to employment, more so that when there is limited employment and the opportunities are few, it's generally seen that there is sometimes an element of exploitation that happens in our community. And it's unfortunate it happens, but I think it's important that, you know, we do make the attempt to actually stand up for our rights. And standing up for rights is not being a troublemaker, it's actually being able to access the right legal information and have people advocate for you on your behalf. So Alan, I join you in actually, condemning really what we are seeing around the world and the protests that are happening in America, but I guess in US, but very close to our home. We cannot forget that our indigenous brothers and sisters have been subjected to this kind of mistreatment and abuse at various times. And we condemn that. And I think it's important, as you said, that, over the last few weeks also, I think UMSU Legal and GSA have heard quite distressing stories about racial discrimination, calling of names, being asked to made derogatory statements in public transport and other places.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Alan, would you like to comment? And just to ensure that people do access UMSU Legal early and have a chat with the lawyers. Any final comments from you, Alan?
Yes, I think that the COVID-19 situation, and I think it's evolving from early on. This is early in the year that we see our Chinese students specifically being singled out. But any sort of we and students shouldn't tolerate any racism or being discriminated against, whether it's walking down the street, taking public transport, in an employment context. They shouldn't cop any of that. It's not right. It's not their fault. If they experience any of that behaviour, there are organisations. They can report. They can come to GSA. They can come to UMSU Legal. There are external organisations that they can take this further. But I think, I think the message really is that we all in this together, and that's not singling out one group of people for something that they haven't done really doesn't help. So and those irrational behaviour really that's not what we want to see.
Yes, thank you so much, Alan, for your presentation, and we definitely thank all the staff and the support we've received from UMSU Legal over the years. And it's been very fortunate that we are able to make positive referrals to your team. I appreciate the time that you've spent with us this morning, and we look forward to working together in running similar webinars to address issues as they address for our graduate and the students of the University of Melbourne. And Tavita, before we finish, what's coming up this afternoon and tomorrow at the on the webinar sessions?
Great, thanks, Rashna. So today, after this session, because it's a Wednesday, we'll be sending out a kids challenge on our Facebook challenge. So this is a challenge that we put together, an activity which parents can run with their children over the weekend. So last one for the semester. We also have a drop-in dance session. So quite popular last week. So we had basically you can drop in to register. You just click the link on our Facebook page. 1:30 today. We'll drop in, and there's some dance there to help with the mental wellness, to help you get loose there and see whether you still got the moves. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. just to continue our webinar schedule at 10 a.m. we have Hilary Dolan from Academic Skills coming to talk to us in a workshop on exam preparation and tips. So please look out for that. Again, we're registered through our Facebook page. We have, and then still tomorrow, we have a weekly recipe going out and a conversation club coming out. And they're going to be talking at 1:30 tomorrow about the Hunger Games. So if you really have something to talk about or really want to discuss some detail about the Hunger Games, that's happening at 1:30 tomorrow afternoon. Friday, to end the week, we have our kids music playlist we're posting on Facebook again to support our graduate students with families. And in the afternoon, we have a DJ performing and streaming live through our Facebook just to ring in the long weekend before SWAT back. But I know that we also have our AGM on Friday. So please, again, look at our Facebook pages to register for our AGM. It's the annual event that sort of reflects on the year that was, and we have some important details to share with our cohort about constitutional change. So that's happening on Friday too. So big week ahead still, but also while we support our students during SWAT backing exams, we put together a program for wellness, mindfulness over the 4 weeks, as well as coffee support. So we're supporting students off campus with access to free coffee weekly. So be on the lookout for that this week. The details will be coming through our social media channels.
Fantastic. So thank you once again, Stevita, for your team for putting up such a fantastic webinar. And a big thank you to Alan. Bye-bye for now.